Hi students, this is Professor Parenti, and I want to talk to you today about Europe in the Renaissance and Reformation. What we're going to be talking about today is defining the major cultural developments of the Renaissance. We're going to talk about social hierarchies in Renaissance Europe, and talking about how these hierarchies shaped people's lives. And the really interesting thing here is that the Renaissance was private at first, and we'll talk about that with the Medicis because it doesn't spread to the public till later. And then with the Reformation, it is immediately public as it's a religious idea. So art is kept private in the Renaissance at first, and then with the Reformation, this new idea about religion and Protestantism is immediately public. So that just makes for some really interesting topics that we'll be talking about. Here in this image, we're looking at Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, and he writes The Prince. He actually wrote it for Catherine Medici, and she had behaved quite well until after she had read The Prince, and then she kind of goes astray when she reads it and interprets it in her own way. He says here, since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved, which is quite different than the saying, it is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved. A very different saying. So onwards we go. Here we have a portrait of Baldassare Castiglione, and it's easy to see on his name. Let me open this up a little bit more here. I'm going to go back. There we go. It's in your book. Easy to see how you could really say his name incorrectly, just kind of a funny thing. So he's an author and he's a courtier. What's a courtier? So he's someone that hangs around the court, and he is either patronized or patronizes other artists or educators, and typically pretty wealthy. So he's looking, and this is unusual, right? This portrait for the time, because he's looking out towards the viewer in this portrait. And the person that painted him, you all know him from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's Raphael. And remember that all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are named after Renaissance painters, right? Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo. I can't think of the other one. Anyways, these individual portraits like Baldassarre's, they express the ideals of the Renaissance. I mean, take a look at his outfit. It's this nice green material. It's elegant. The portrait itself, he's in the center of it, top to bottom. It's balanced. The color is balanced with the black in the background. And most of all, it's this kind of self-awareness. He's not looking humble. He's looking very proud. And all of these are new ideas. Renaissance meaning rebirth, and especially after coming out of, we no longer call it Dark Ages, but coming out of the mid to late Middle Ages, we say. So the book that Baldassare writes, it's about the behavior of courtiers like himself, and he says that they were designed to make people marvel at him, to transform himself into a beautiful spectacle for others to contemplate. So a lot of thinking going on in this period. Here's a brief chronology. The Medici family, they held power in Florence, and they'll be highly influential politically, but also fashion, and moreover, probably in a passive kind of way, what people ate. They made that popular. And then we'll look at the movable metal type in Germany, which will become really important for print. And then marriages, because this is how people really kept and maintained power. The different paintings, the diet of worms. No, they didn't eat actual worms. It was a geographic location where Martin Luther went, the original Martin Luther. And then some wars, revolts, And then we're going to move on down towards Civil War in Netherlands, St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, where if you watch Game of Thrones, you'll see that it has a lot of likenesses to it. In fact, Game of Thrones, I'll reference it quite a bit in here because it's pretty relevant and easy to relate to. Let me open this up a little bit. There we go. All right, so for the Renaissance culture, it is this self-conscious awareness among the, what do I have, the once? There's no such thing as a once. It should be the 11th and 15th Italian scholars, writers, and humanists. So starting with the Medici family, they were involved in banking, arts. They sponsored Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and the family, they have vast wealth throughout, and they're not only very wealthy, but they're well connected, and they become really important patrons of the arts. But remember when I first said that the Renaissance is private at first, and the Medici family helps keep it this way for quite some time because it happens in people's homes or palaces. So the Medici, their financial support, it helped artists create some of the world's greatest masterpieces. We'll take a look at those in a second. And then on to the cities of Italy. Banking and trade had dominated the peninsula, and we can think earlier banking and trade as far as the Crusades, because that's the history with it of financing it, and it's why it originates in Italy. So Italian cities, they become cultural centers for the fine arts. Florence is where the Renaissance began. It was the most notable of the 5 powers that dominated the peninsula. So the 5 being Florence, Venice, Milan, the Papal States, Naples. And the Papal States, of course, are where the Pope lived. The rise of humanism. Humanists, they focused on understanding human nature through the study of Latin classics. And while they viewed the family and social and religious groups as meaningful, humanists felt these groups were just the starting point for individual achievement. So there was much more to be done. Now, they put their educational ideas into practice by opening up institutions in which students learned Latin, and then they studied Roman history and political philosophy. Finally, the students learned the Greek language and studied Greek literature and philosophy. Now, so think about this. So first, you go back up to A, wealth and power in Renaissance Italy, and all of that is residing in these individual families, specifically the Medici family, and so the art is there. And then humanism comes out, and it focuses on the individual, and this is where you can see it's starting to transition to the public. Now on to Machiavelli. He is criticized for writing The Prince, and even so, Catherine Medici, she likes it very much, and his work is viewed as a modern guide to political science even today. So let's take a look at that really quick.
Welcome to the Macat Multimedia Series, a Macat analysis of Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince. He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command. So wrote the Italian political theorist Niccolò Machiavelli, who believed he knew how rulers could successfully take and maintain power. In his 16th century book, The Prince, he argued that ethics and effectiveness are separate in politics, a scandalous notion at the time. Machiavelli believed that virtù is the defining factor of princely success, a kind of brutal effectiveness, outthinking and outbetraying whilst outwardly still looking like a good Christian. And if that meant breaking their word to achieve their aim, so be it. Machiavelli simply advised that rulers did so in secret, to, of course, maintain their reputation for honesty. Along with virtù, Machiavelli declared that necessità, the ability to be cruel when necessary, and fortuna, the ability to believe that success will follow goodness and honesty, were also important factors for successful rule. He wrote that political thinking meant forgetting about the soul. Sticking to a system of morality made a ruler vulnerable. A moral prince could be easily exploited by others to maintain or increase their power, and so what was good for the soul was better left out of the equation. So, how could a group of students use Machiavelli's guide to further themselves? Let's imagine they're preparing to take a test. Most students believe in the importance of Machiavelli's Fortuna. They are going to study hard and be honest. But a second group decide, including student Cesare, they will steal the answers to the test beforehand. This group of students represent Machiavelli's Necessita. Exam day arrives, and when the test is over, Cesare secretly writes a note which he slips in with his test paper. Results day comes around and the Fortuna group are handed their grades. Most of them have done reasonably well, but none achieve remarkably high scores. The Necessita group who cheated are quietly confident, but when they receive their papers back, they have all been disqualified, despite doing well on the test. Someone must have tipped the university off, and soon it becomes clear who. Cesare gets a good grade, and is awarded an honesty prize for exposing the cheaters' conspiracy. He has achieved the highest position by applying virtu. Not only did he cheat, he betrayed everyone else's trust and managed to do so under the guise of honesty, even winning an award for it. Modern interpreters believe that Machiavelli did not reject the idea of goodness, but reminds the reader that behind those who claim political virtue, there is often deceit. Machiavelli is considered to be the first real political scientist of modernity. A more detailed examination of his ideas can be found in the Macquart analysis.
So you can see there's a great example here when we're talking about modern politics. If you think about Hillary Clinton, or if you think about Donald Trump, and you think about all of their issues and the platforms that they're standing for, you can definitely see how those three ideas that he mentions in The Prince function to preserve order and security, or not. Maybe we're falling apart at this point. There's certainly some other schools of thought in play right now. Okay, so we've looked at The Prince. Now I want to go back up and catch up on the Medici family. The slow intro. Okay, so I'm going to put it to a stop here. I'm going to leave you off here with these thoughts and ask you, what was the importance of the Renaissance, and how did it differ between the Reformation publicly versus internally or private families?